Lips, coming to you out of Kona, Hawaii today. Yeah, I'm kind of on vacation, so I'm on the other side of the island. And this is August 16th, 2016, and I got a really good show for you tonight. I have Judy Bello coming on, and she's going to talk about her just recent peace trip to Syria. So that should be very, very interesting. And I have Peace Activist Julie Levine coming on from California, and she's going to talk about what's going on over there. And before I bring Judy on, I just want to bring this up. Did you know that the Defense Department, who really can't keep track of their pennies and dollars and cents, can't provide adequate documentation for $6.5 trillion worth of year-end adjustments to the Army General Fund transactions? I mean, honest to God, if we have our checkbooks a couple dollars off balance, yeah, we get our friggin' hand slapped and fined, but they get away with 6.5 trillion. Trillion. You know, that's above billion, guys. That's the next level. Trillion means it's so out of balance and so asinine that it's beyond billion. So they had to go to trillion. Okay. Good God. All right. So I don't even want to get into that stuff because it's so crazy. And I just don't want to talk about it right now. So just remind everybody that, you know, we've got the World Enlightenment going on, the energy work on September 22nd. And all we want you to do is do a little bit of chanting. May divine enlightenment descend around everyone now. May divine enlightenment awaken within everyone now. Now that's not really hard to forget. And if you do, you can always contact me on Facebook, and I can send this little thing out to you so you can take it off, make a print, put it on the refrigerator, and do it. Say it as much as you can. The more you do, the quicker we're going to bring the world into enlightenment. So check out the World Enlightenment website at enlightenmentmovement2016.shutterfly.com. And I put on there all the information about World Enlightenment, what we have to do, who we're up against, and I put daily energy work on there. So you can actually join in and help us amplify the movement and really take us into the divine age of enlightenment. So Judy Bello has been on before, and I really, really love this woman. You know, if she was a guy, I would say she's got balls that hang down to the floor. And the first time she was on, she talked about drones. Uh-oh. Did she? Okay. Wow, I can't seem to drag her on, Liz. Go figure.
Okay. If
she's waiting.
If she's listening, she can call in 310-421-4053.
Oops, 53. No. Okay. Oops, I accidentally put a B in there. I think she'll get it. Da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da.
Well, I ask about playing music during times like this, and Mike said since I had Windows 7, it would probably be complicated to do, so I guess...
Oh, you need to get modern, woman.
I know, but everything is set up where I like it. If I upgrade it, I'm going to start having trouble. So
I understand.
I guess we can practice our singing.
Well, when I did Okay, so I put contact. I don't know why she's not picking up. And I asked her to call, so uh, let's see. Can I give her? Let me write her. You should have her number in there too.
Oh, it's been so long ago, it's gone. It only holds the information for a while, like a couple of weeks, and then it's gone. And
All right. That's her phone
I
number.
do not have her on my contact list.
Okay, well, I just sent her a contact, and I
You
just
want
gave
to?
you her phone number.
So you can't drag her in at all.
I've been trying my best, and it ain't doing it.
Oh,
Yes.
here we go.
Wait. Yeah? Is it doing anything?
I just sent her a contact request, and I think it will let me add her to the group call. We'll see.
See, you don't need music. You just get chit chat.
And I'm calling her now. So we'll see what happens.
So at
Hi,
least I'm not
Kathy.
doing Jeopardy. Hi, Judy. How are you?
Good, good. How are you?
You know, I'm having a pretty marvelous day, I have to say.
Oh, good. Good to hear.
Well, Judy, I was just telling everybody that, you know, I really, if you were a guy, you would have balls that were bouncing off the floor. They'd be so big. You know, you're kind of like my hero.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah, you,
Firestorm has begun.
you go into areas where no mortal man would go.
Well, actually, I traveled with some mortals, men and women. So I think people are afraid. I think the picture of what's going on there is pretty distorted here.
Well, let's tell people what we're talking about, okay? We're talking about your trip that you did with to Syria, and why in the world did you go there?
Well, I had been studying Syria for a long time before the war began there. And I was interested, I got interested actually through investigating what was going on in the Iraq War and Palestine and Lebanon, because Syria was, until all this began, it had the largest number of refugees and treated them better than any other country in the region. It had millions. It had like 1.5 million Iraqis and over 1 million Palestinians, and living basically like everybody else in the country, intermingling, getting jobs, sending their children to school. And so I was pretty impressed by that. And then they started to have some interaction. Bashar Assad and his wife started to have some interaction with the West, and which of course ended with the current conflagration. I thought it was all very interesting how the whole situation pivoted the way it did. And so I went actually with a delegation 2 years ago to Damascus as an election watcher or an election observer in the election at that time when Bashar Assad was reelected to the presidency. And while I was there, I traveled to Tartus. I flew to Tartus and I traveled around there and to different polling stations and stuff. It was very interesting. So,
well, can I ask you, how do you become an election observer?
Well, in this particular case, because the West was not acknowledging the election at all, there were only a handful of Americans there, and I just happened to know somebody who was going. And so it worked out that I was able to get an invitation. And also, I think there was an Iranian NGO that was assisting the Americans to get there. And because I've been to Iran, and I apparently got along well with everyone, when someone asked if I could come, they agreed. So that was the first time. Now, this time, the U.S. Peace Council, members of this very mainstream anti-war organization, negotiated for about a year with the Syrian ambassador at the United Nations. His name is Bashar Jafari, and made all the arrangements for this trip. And we had a very, and I was invited to join because I belong to an organization that's also based around New York and has national reach, called United National Anti-War Coalition, or UNIC for short. So someone else actually was going to go to represent UNAC, and then he couldn't go, so I asked to go in his place. And again, I was taken on at the last minute. So, but I knew that, I mean, I'm actually not a person who would go to a terrorist camp and mingle with people that, you know, where I wasn't even sure there was a civilian population. But to travel basically from Beirut to Damascus on a road that's been cleared and it is, you know, fairly well traversed at this point, and to go to this city, this huge city. Damascus is a large city. It's a couple million people at least, I think. And so, and it's functioning as a city. And as were the areas in Tartus and Latakia that I visited, everything seemed like, it seemed like there was a war going on, but it wasn't right there. And in Damascus, it's a little more nerve-wracking because you can hear the shelling in the distance because they're fighting along the border of the city. Oh, excuse me, my God. So anyway, it was, so I didn't feel afraid to go. And when we were there, we met with people like the Grand Mufti of Syria. He's like the highest Sunni cleric in the country. He's a Sunni scholar. And people like, we met with one of the Orthodox bishops, the famous Lucas. And so there was a lot of interesting stuff going on. While I was there, we talked to civilians. We met with a bunch of different ministers of government and people in parliament. We met with the chamber of, they call it the Chamber of Industry instead of the Chamber of Commerce. So we got a lot of different perspectives on what's happening there. And we only really went outside of Damascus once to visit some Christian towns on the Lebanese border that had been attacked last year and that were now resettled. So, so that's the thing about maybe being afraid to go there. Go ahead.
Now, when you, again, what is a mufti? And how did you actually end up with a mufti? Sorry. And why? Why were you meeting? It was like a cleric?
Yeah, we met with a lot of people there. The first time I went, we met actually with a lot of ordinary people on the street. And this time we met with officials who are making decisions about what's going on in Syria. So I thought it was important to hear what they're thinking about what they're doing, because there's just such awful publicity here about it and such a high propaganda level. And so I wanted to hear what they had to say to justify where they're coming from, because when we read the mainstream news in the United States, we're not hearing from the Syrian people either. We're hearing what the U.S. government wants us to hear. So in this case, we went directly to people who are involved there. And as I say, I'm not one who would go into a terrorist camp, to be honest. I just can't imagine it. But I did visit a refugee camp, and where there were a lot of people grateful to be back in the government-held area of Syria. They have 2/3 of the refugees from the areas held by militants in Syria are still in Syria. Only 1/3 have actually left the country for Jordan or Turkey or Europe. 2/3 of them are actually still in the country, and we were told that there are no tents. A lot of them just live with relatives or people they know in a different city, but a lot of them also live in refurbished schools and buildings that were basically sort of massaged so that people could live there, and really all they want is to go home, but they can't go home as long as the place where they live is under the control of these people who, might shoot someone for smoking a cigarette in public, or who, if a woman were to walk down the street with her hair uncovered, she might be humiliated and publicly raped or even murdered for doing that.
So when you were there, did you have to dress, in the burqa?
Oh, no. No, in Syria is a very modern, secular country, and there are women who cover their hair, and there are women who don't. There are women who wear long dresses, and there are women who walk around in, there's a somewhat conservative style of dress. Women are more likely to wear clothing with sleeves, and to not have I never didn't see anybody in a mini skirt, but there's no, they don't wear burqas or niqabs. They don't even have to cover their hair. There's 43 women in the Syrian parliament, and some of whom I met. The head of the parliament right now is the speaker of the parliament right now is a woman. And they have a lot of freedoms there. And when we talk now, what is a mufti? To get back to that question, it's a high Sunni official, and culturally they're tied to the area that Westerners might call the Levant. For instance, there was a very famous mufti who in Palestine. At the time, Israel overran Palestine in the late 40s. And he was actually sort of slandered ultimately in the press because he was very upset with the British. So when World War II started, he thought it would behoove him to side with the Germans, because here they had, these Zionists invading his country. But he was wrong in how he assessed things, but he was put in a political role, and he didn't, handle it as well as he might have. But the muftis in general have political as well as spiritual positions in the community, and there's one in Damascus, and I'm sure there's one in Beirut, and it's sort of that part of the world that's one of the Sunni positions. And if it happens, his name is Harun, the Grand Mufti, the current Mufti in Damascus, preaches tolerance and love. He says that there are 23 million people in Syria, just as a comment so you understand what he said means. He said that how many people are in his care, and he said 23 million, because as far as he's concerned, every person in Syria is part of the people that are under his tutelage. And the bishop, when we talked to Bishop Lucas, said exactly the same thing. He said, I'm responsible for the welfare of 23 million people, and not just the Christians, because in this country, the Christians and the Muslims, and for a long time even the Jews, were one people, because all of those religions more or less got their start in what you might call Greater Syria, or what we might call the Levant, which is again that area. It's Palestine, Jordan, and Syria and Lebanon. So this area used to be, for many, for thousands of years, was all very much culturally connected. There were differences, but it was culturally related. So, but it was very good to meet with them. He and the bishop wanted to come on a speaking tour to the United States to explain to the people in America that narrow-minded bigots were not only not what they think Islam should be, but it's not what Syria is about. That Syria is a secular country and that people don't judge each other according to their religion. And they went to Jordan together to get their visas, and the bishop got a visa, and they humiliated the mufti and then denied him a visa. So,
I understand when you talk about being around people that are secular and they don't look at you and judging you by your religion. That happened to me when I was in Ghana. And it was the most beautiful experience I have ever had. And I always say if their weather didn't suck to big one, I'd move there.
Yeah, I know. Well, and when I was at the college, I noticed it just, and you see a lot of this in Kurdistan. When I was in Kurdistan, you saw this too. A couple of girls walked past us. We went to the college and met with some people there. And a couple of girls walked past us into what might have been a student union or something. And one of them was wearing a head covering and a long dress. And the other one was wearing a pair of jeans and a t-shirt. And she had long curly hair flowing down her back. And they walked together down the sidewalk and into the building. And there was no judgment in that. It was just how they happened to be dressed. And I think that's somehow the secularism in the West has lost touch with that. It's become this rigid thing, like there's some other governance, like in France, they've made it illegal to wear a hijab or to wear a burqa or whatever. Nobody wears burqas, so Arabs, at least not in Syria, they don't wear burqas or any, even the conservatively dressed people, they dress more like Iranians. They wear kind of a long fitted coat over their regular clothes when they're out in public. And they wear a fitted thing over their head and nothing covering their face. So it's not like...
you were there?
Yes?
When you were there, did you see a lot of, I call them mercenaries from the United States, and I guess the more modern term nowadays is contractors over there?
Yeah, well, actually, see, where I was, the Syrian army, the Syrian government knew we were there, and they would never ever. We did have a military protection guys that tended to be around wherever we went, but and I mean they were really there for our protection. Because they don't know what's going to happen. I mean, there was a bomb that fell on a restaurant on one side of town while we were there and killed 11 people eating dinner in a restaurant. It was launched by the militants into Damascus. I forgot my question now. We would not have been allowed to. They told us out front. They said, you can talk to the opposition people who actually started the protests before the war began, but we're not going to let you be around anyone who's carrying weapons or who's taken up arms against their country. In other words, there's a difference between being a political opposition and being a person who takes up arms against your country. And even more so in a case like this, where the people who took up arms against their country are being paid by foreign governments and are mingling with foreign fighters. Like, these people are incredibly dangerous. And I want to say I'd like to hear a side of the story from people that they're holding hostage which is what the government perceives that to be, the civilians in their areas. But I really would not want to be around people who are that violent. And I know that the Syrian government has taken the blame for all the violence there, but Syria has an army that's an army of the people. And the war has gone on long enough, and there's a draft there that a lot of the people are very young in the army. And they're fighting for their country. They're fighting to have, for the security and freedom of everyone in their country. And as whatever you hear about, wars are horrible things. People do that. They bomb each other, they fight, they shoot guns at each other, and people get injured and buildings get destroyed and so on. And I will say that the Syrian government has, we learned about a reconciliation program they have. It's actually run by a guy, his name is Ali Haidar. He is, he led the opposition protests initially in early 2011 because he was inspired by the idea of an Arab Spring. And his party is a socialist party. And he's chairman of a large socialist party that's been around as long as the Ba'ath Party has, which is the main party in Syria that President Assad belongs to. And but he would never consider taking up arms. And when the more right-wing people in the opposition, when there was violence, he didn't believe it was coming from Syrians. He felt that it was coming from outside. And so rather than commit his people to the violence, he took them back into the government. And so they, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish. Sorry.
Go to?
No, go ahead and finish what you were saying.
Oh, so what happened was, like a year after, a lot of the things that happened with violence early on are just openly blamed on the government in the American news. But there's a lot of stories, and I actually read them at the time, which is one reason why I wanted to see what's going on in Syria myself, because there was an American living in Syria at the time who devoted his blog originally to telling the truth about what was happening. And he did actually eventually join with the American government in their dealings, but that's another story. But at the time, he posted news articles that showed certain things happening, like huge riots and sniper fire that one could not blame on the government with any assurance, because there was so much chaos. It's kind of like what happened in Ukraine, that to blame the government is just, why would the government want to do that? The government actually sent people to, make peace in Hama after the original people were angry over some things that happened there, and the government actually sent ministers to try and chill it out, and they fired the governor who was responsible, and they did all these things, and yet still they ended up with snipers. So it's hard to blame on them. And at the same time, there were several very obvious instances where members of the military were called out and were massacred by militants from somewhere. And these happened like in the spring of 2011, so it was at the very beginning. And so the military guys started to get really upset, and it started to look more like a war. So I'm not going to take anyone. How what?
Oh, how many foreign countries are involved, and how did they get involved? If you're going to do I'm going to do what?
Okay. If you're going to do what?
Well, if you're going to do a scorecard for stupid people and make it really simple, well, how would you approach it?
Okay, well, first of all, there's Turkey and Jordan, which border on, and Israel, all of which border on Syria. Israel has been helping. There's a group called Al Nusra. They just changed their name, but they're a self-proclaimed branch of Al Qaeda, and they just said, well, they cannot cut their connection with Al Qaeda. But through this whole war, they've been a self-proclaimed branch of Al Qaeda, and they've been bringing in fighters from all over the place. And Israel has had an open door policy to treat injured soldiers from Al Nusra in the Golan. They have bombed Syria 3 or 4 times since this war began. And in the south, there's a staging area that the U.S. uses in Jordan to train fighters and send them back into Syria to fight against their government with weapons rather than with politics. And Turkey has had an open door policy to ISIS. The whole border has been open to Al Nusra and ISIS pretty much for the whole duration of the war. And there's all kinds of YouTube videos and everything else of showing them, you know, standing in the gateways of border crossings and with their, you know, ISIS flag and so on. And there's videos of them in Istanbul riding on the tram with their particular, wearing the ISIS logo and stuff and playing with their cell phones. Turkey has been allowing them to come from all over the world through Turkey, and there are training camps in Turkey, one of which is very close to the American base at Incirlik, which does make you wonder what the American connection is. They were by Turkey, Erdogan's son was buying oil from ISIS, and they had like thousands of truckloads of it every day shipping this stuff up to Turkey, and then they were putting it on a boat and going and selling it, sending it out onto the ocean and selling it through Israel, among other places. And they were mixing it with, other oil transits so that they could sell it and make a profit. So the Russians actually, one of the things they did when they were doing their earlier bombing campaign was they published all these pictures of the thousands of trucks going down the road, which of course the Americans saw them too when they said they were fighting ISIS, but they never touched them. And so Russia bombed all these trucks and bombed the roads and sort of outed Erdogan's son, which of course caused a little bad blood there, but it also shows the truth about who's supporting the terrorists in Syria. So that is one thing. The Americans, every large batch of weapons that the Americans have sent in for their so-called moderate rebels have been confiscated either by ISIS or Al Nusra. In other words, by Al Qaeda or by Al Qaeda. And so why would they keep sending them in? There's a video showing the Senate the Senate Military Committee grilling a general about the Syrians that they were supposed to be training to fight the government. And I think we spent $5 million on it, and they ended up with 70 guys, and they went back to Syria, and 50 of them immediately defected to Al Nusra. And of the rest, there were 5 that managed to stay connected to the U.S. And all the rest were either killed or they were defected. You can see, like, I can't remember which senator it was, but he was like, his eyes were popping out. He was going, 5? But the Americans have sent millions of dollars of weapons over there, supposedly to help fight against Assad, but which are being used against the Syrian people and the Syrian army, and which is also the Syrian people. And so this is a violation of the sovereignty of Syria. And I've seen him interviewed a number of times, and they always grill Assad about the barrel bombs and things like that, but And he'll say, well, yes, this is a war and people are dropping bombs and they're fighting. And but one of the things that you see if you follow certain sources is that they attempt to evacuate any area. The Syrian army attempts to evacuate any area before the fighting begins. And that's one reason why there's so many refugees, because they evacuate areas and then the fighting ramps up in those areas. And so they might show you a picture of a lot of bombed out buildings, but there's a good chance that if the government was in control of the situation, they evacuated them before the fighting began. Whereas what the militants do is they try to keep the civilians there as basically, hostages, as human shields. So, and many of them keep their families with them at all times, so that if there's fighting, there'll be civilians killed. But in Syria, the Syrian government tries to empty out any area where there's fighting and only send people back when it's done. So, for instance, the town of Malula, there was a major firefight there. They did a lot of damage to this 1,200-year-old monastery where there's supposedly a saint is buried, a Christian monastery, and but only like 10 people from the local town were killed. 200 soldiers died driving the militants out of that town. And the road there now is clear, and the beginnings of an effort to rebuild it are in progress, but it's not going to happen quickly because all their resources are going to survival.
It's amazing, though. I mean, I've never heard of any military or any government removing the civilian population before they did battle. I mean, normally the battle is against the civilians. They're the ones who end up with the most damage.
Well, and they are getting a lot of damage in this because the militants do a lot of damage. They, what's the name of town? There's a town in northern Latakia where again, a Christian town. They really are, they go into Christian towns and they slaughter everyone in sight. And one of their sayings is, Christians to Beirut, Alawites to the grave, or Alawites to hell. So what they're saying is they're going to drive the Christians out of Syria and kill all the Alawites. And, of course, there's a lot of other sects in Syria. They were trying to kill all the Druze, too. And they were, and they basically are a hostile force to the Kurds. So they're basically want to kill anybody that's not in this narrow group that they approve of. And that isn't as intolerant as they are. So back to other countries involved, though. So I named the 3 surrounding countries, Jordan, Israel, and Turkey. And then we have Saudi Arabia and Qatar. Now there's an organization of the Muslim Brotherhood in Syria that back in the early 80s was once again becoming very violent and oppressive in the city where they lived and making a lot of threats. And they had suicide bombers and so on. And there was a big fight, and it's really hard to tell in retrospect how many people were killed, but it was under the president at the time was Bashar Assad's father, and the general who actually was in charge of the battle was his uncle, who's currently in exile because he kept he kept putting up coups until they got rid of him, sent him to Paris. So they, but at any rate, the Muslim Brotherhood was also a problem in Egypt because they kept trying to assassinate Nasser at the sort of height of the socialist revolution among Arabs. And so, and they were banned from politics in Egypt and in Syria, actually, for a long time because they were so narrow-minded and destructive and violent. So, at any rate, in Syria there was this passing, so there was sort of a sort of axe to grind, and so Qatar, this is one of the places too, areas too, that suffered from the drought that's been ongoing for some time in the Middle East. And Syria's been one of the countries most hurt because Turkey is upstream on the Euphrates and they control the water that manages to get to Syria and Iraq from there. So so Qatar has been paying any member of the Muslim Brotherhood in Syria who will fight against his government. And so they might go to these unemployed guys who do get like sort of welfare services from the government. This is, say, back around 2010 and 11. But their pride was wounded. Their farm was gone because it was dry. And they were upset and angry. And so Qatar said, well, you know, we'll pay you and you can fight to have control of the government and then you can do things your way. And you could do that here, I think, if someone was big enough to go after the U.S. You could probably pay the Tea Party and they would start a war. But maybe that's a really radical thing to say, but they're pretty determined to be carrying their guns. And it is a little scary. So Qatar, and then Saudi Arabia is a main funder of the militants in Syria, and they pay people from all over the world to go to Syria and fight. And the government says that it's not the government doing it, but the government, but most of the people with money in Saudi Arabia are in the royal family. And there are preachers there that preach, actually, on their regular Friday sermons. There are Wahhabi preachers there that will, you know, say, if you want to be a good Muslim, then take up a gun and go to Syria and fight for your God. And again, Saudi Arabia is a country where there are a lot of oppressed people, a lot of very poor people, that there's a lot of like young people who don't really have much of a future there. And so there they are sitting there saying, if you want to be a man, with this preacher telling them, if you want to be a man, if you want to be loved by God, then go and fight. So that's how they got a lot of people to go and fight in Afghanistan too. And they give them money and they send them off to battle. And there was some documentation at one point, actually from the U.S. Military, that they would arrive in the country where they were going to fight. So now they would probably arrive at a training camp in Turkey. At the time, that was a training camp on the Iraq border to fight in Iraq. And it said on their paperwork whether or not they wanted to be a suicide bomber. And it said how much money they brought, because they would bring like thousands of dollars to donate to the cause with them when they came to fight. And it was a whole operation, and it's all run out of Saudi Arabia. So there are people fighting there. There are men on the ground fighting in Syria. They said 151 countries. The ones I could think of, though, they're Chechens from Russia. There are Uyghurs. They have their own community, actually, from China. There are people from every European country, France, Germany, Norway, Denmark, Greece, whatever. There are people from the United States and the United Kingdom. There are people from Australia fighting there on the ground. There are people from all over the world have gone to join that war. There are people from all over the Middle East. There are Afghans. And there's a lot of people who have joined this war against the Syrian government. And so the Syrian government has taken a stance, though, and this is through Ali Haidar, who's called Minister of Reconciliation. And he's trying to come up with a plan to allow the Syrians who are fighting to lay down their arms and rejoin society, and at the same time to continue the effort to drive out the foreign fighters and make sure they don't come back. So it's a joint military and reconciliation sort of endeavor. And it requires a whole lot of setup. It doesn't happen quickly because there needs to be a certain amount of military pressure, and at the same time there needs to be somebody who can reach through and work with the community that's being held hostage and work with the fighters who are ambivalent and try and bring them back out.
What do you think the U.S. government's going to get out of this?
I think that a couple things. One is they're appeasing their allies in Egypt and not Egypt, in Saudi Arabia and Israel. And another is that basically a Middle Eastern chaos is better than a Middle East that opposes the United States. And right before all this stuff began, Syria made a agreement with Iraq and Iran to build a pipeline to transport oil from Iran straight out through Syria, which has a Mediterranean coast, and over to Europe. And so this pipeline would have undercut the one that the U.S. is building, or the U.S. allies are building, that goes from Qatar through Turkey and Israel and out to the Mediterranean. So this would mean that different beneficiaries from providing, because Europe is a major consumer of oil and gas and they don't have any. So right now, Russia is actually the biggest, or was the biggest beneficiary of that because they were mostly getting Russian gas and oil. But so these pipelines, basically Assad decided to bond with Iraq and Iran and Lebanon rather than, you know, say let the United States put their pipeline from Turkey through Syria into Israel. And so when that happened, all of a sudden Assad became a monster. Immediately, instant turnaround. And it's unfortunate, but I think these are the reasons. There's geopolitical reasons why these things are happening. And one might ask, like, why does the U.S. even care? We don't get our oil and gas from Qatar and Saudi Arabia. But the U.S. wants to control the oil that China needs. It wants to control the oil that Europe needs so that it has power over China and Europe through this material necessity. And the Saudi Arabia in particular, their oil is critical to the value of the dollar being stable. So for the dollar to stay the lead currency, oil has to continue to be paid for in dollars. But all of the countries that we've attacked so far are countries that were willing to trade oil in something other than dollars. So Iran and Iraq was talking about trading oil in euros right before we attacked them. Iran wanted to do, well, and is doing a basket of currency. They sell oil to China. They were for a long time selling oil to Turkey for gold. They sell oil to India for Indian currency, and then they buy Indian goods with it. And Syria, by, say, banding together with Iran and Iraq, put itself in that same league of people that are going to trade in other currencies. And so for the U.S., there appears to be a huge economic issue at stake, except that the way China is growing, the way India is growing, the way even Africa is developing, there's no way that the dollar can stay the central currency forever, in my opinion. and this is a radical thing to say, and I know most Americans have never thought about it, and they try not to, but the question is, by holding out and using military power to hang on to that, edge in the world, we could be destroying all possibility of just getting along with everybody else, and instead of being the only country that has resources, be one of a wealthy global public, a wealthy global citizenry, rather than having to compete to be the only ones that have control. And the United States government seems not to get this.
Well, we're down to our last 2 minutes, Judy. What do you want to tell everybody?
I want to tell everybody that, yes, we need to stop the wars. We need to stop blaming other people. And that we can stop the war, say, in Syria pretty easily by taking away the resources from ISIS and al-Nusra and from these fighters flooding into the country. Because the internal part of the war, the government can handle through their reconciliation and whatever else they're doing. But as long as we keep fueling these wars with weapons and cash, and as long as we let our allies keep fueling these wars with men and cash and weapons, the wars will continue. And we are not fighting this war for democracy in Syria. The people on the side that the U.S. supports are not interested in democracy. They are religious fundamentalists who only want to tolerate other people with their own belief system. The government we are fighting against is a secular government that supports tolerance of all religions and civil freedoms in terms of how you dress, in terms of women having rights within society, and in terms of so many values that Americans think are important. So I can't understand why, if Americans really understood this, they would
on that, Judy, we're out of time. Thank you so much for coming on. You'll have to come on again.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Cathy Bilsky, the Quantum Leap Let Night Unite show on Revolution Radio at Freedom's Lips. And Revolution Radio is listener-sponsored. We really depend on you for your donations to keep us alive and on air. And without you, we couldn't do it. So, you can go to Revolution Radio's website and press their donation button. This isn't difficult. Even the cost of a Starbucks coffee is really welcome, very much appreciated, and it helps us stay on air. So again, go to Revolution Radio and their donation button, and come on, give. Help us stay on air, and we are so grateful. Remember, what goes around comes around. And if you want more information about me, you can go to my website at www.angelliteom.com. That's ANGELITEOM.com. And I've got all my cool healing angel light tools there, and you can get a couple books there. I've got one you can download for free, and their book is Spiritual Basics, and it's just helping you remember what you've forgotten. And I also have my cursory over there, and if you look under free healing, you can download that for free. Or you can go on YouTube, and I've got all kinds of Revolution Radio, my shows from here, and some other things. I've got the curse removal, and I have a soul retrieval on YouTube that you can do. And for you guys out there, if anybody has a Geiger counter, could you please take a reading and send it to me? You can send it to my Facebook page. Just check under Cathy Bilsky, and you can message me. And give me the information, and I will share it with others. So tonight, I have another special guest coming on, and her name is Julie Levine from California, who's a really, really great activist. And tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about politics. Oh my God. and the DNC and Bernie Sanders. Julie, welcome.
Thank you, Kathy. It's wonderful to be here on Revolution Radio and on your show.
You want to tell us a little bit about you?
Sure. I'm a peace and justice activist. I grew up in South America with my family, in Brazil first and then Chile. And so I had quite an experience growing up, which I think has influenced my life path. First, in Brazil, there was a lot of poverty, and my mom started volunteering in the favelas, right, in the slums. And I was able to see the rapport she developed with the people there in Rio. And also, I could see very clearly that even though the United States was doing business there, my dad was a businessman, right? They didn't seem to care that children were starving on the street, this kind of thing. And I started asking questions like, if we're a democracy, how come we don't care about it here in Brazil? And didn't have easy answers for that. So that influenced me, and then we moved to Chile. And in Chile, a parliamentarian who was a carer, I would say, somebody who likes to share and care, thus a red communist socialist, if he's anything other than the free market, was Salvador Allende. He ran for office, and he had the support of, I'd say, the majority of the people, because it was about literacy programs, healthcare, and the mountains, and really involving people in a way that they hadn't before, and allowing like the peasants to have a little piece of land, which they never had. They being raped by the ranchers, etc. It was not a good scene. So we supported Allende as well, and he won. And those of you probably know, about 3.5 years later, the CIA masterminded his assassination as part of a coup with Pinochet, who was a horrible fascist dictator trained by the United States School of the Americas to torture and kill. And he did that in the tune of millions of people.
So you were actually living there during that time?
No, I lived there until Allende was voted into office, and at that time, the United States planned their coup from day one. We now know that from a report on, what's it called, not Frontline, but one of those shows, it was Frontline, that they were planning his assassination and the coup from day one of his taking office. But when he took office is when they moved all the people from the United States out with special planes and stuff. The United States did it because they had to stop their relations in order to justify the assassination and the coup. So anyway, all of those things influenced me quite a bit, and I decided I needed to devote my life to working for a more economic and social equity in the world, making sure that everyone could win, literally not be killed in wars. So that really became my path. Did you know that, Kathy?
But you tell it so fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, okay. Let me just do this real quick. Okay. All right. So I raised the volume. I hope that helps. You were a staunch Bernie Sanders supporter.
Mm-hmm.
How did you feel at the Democratic convention when Bernie Sanders lost?
Yeah, well, sort of lost. That's an interesting thing. Okay, let me back up for a minute and say, why was I a Bernie Sanders supporter? Okay, I'm one of these people that I was a Democrat. I never felt it was my party. I always realized that both parties were, bought and paid for by corporations. But the Democratic Party seemed to be more about caring and sharing and the underdog than the Republican Party, so I preferred that one. And the first time that Obama ran for president, I was very gung-ho, actually. I gave a lot of money to his campaign, and I was like, I believe we can be the change. And I allowed myself to get a little bit, carried away by that. And sadly, what did he do? He expanded drone wars. He expanded the number of countries we were against. He, during his tenure, the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, militarizing the police and allowing the use of the military against civilians. I could go on and on. We weren't going to do this, not what we're doing here. But bottom line was, I realized that, funded by Monsanto, supported by and supporting of oil and gas, and we can go on.
Well, I can say that you're no longer an Obama fan.
Right. So the second time around, I did a protest vote. I believe I don't remember, voted green, voted whatever, protest. and felt that we really need to build a third party in this country, although I didn't think that that was going to be possible under the current electoral system, which of course is designed to prevent that from happening in any kind of meaningful way. So I left the Democratic Party and did continue to do my organizing for justice outside of it. And then Bernie came around, and I felt that here was finally somebody that was worth supporting, somebody who was real, somebody who was kind, somebody who was about the people, somebody who was not a 1%er billionaire. Lots of reasons why. I believed in his program. I was moved and motivated, and I stood online for 8, 9, 10 hours at a time to hear his rallies, along with a lot of young people, old people, and everybody else. And it felt like really a giant love fest. It was felt truly spiritual. We were all putting up hearts in the air, and we felt that kind of connection that came from caring about something other than ourselves. Mm-hmm. It was a beautiful moment. So I wasn't surprised, and I said this from the very beginning, they're not going to let Bernie Sanders win. There's no way. They promised this election to Hillary Clinton. I also was pretty dubious when Trump came in the race and started doing as well as he did, because it seemed to me that, yes, it's true, he inspired people who maybe didn't have the political knowledge to be able to perhaps understand that it wasn't going to benefit them. He wasn't going to give them jobs because he was about taking their jobs away and taking them overseas or paying sub-minimum wage, whatever. But also I thought it was interesting because Trump and Hillary Clinton have been friends. I mean, you can see this very clearly. Their families are friends and everything else. And I was wondering, why is he in the race when it's clear that they're going to give this election to Hillary Clinton? And I just want to say, because I read something today which was quite brilliant, I forget who, written by somebody like one of our past presidents, that sheep, basically in a nation of sheep, anybody who does critical thinking will be seen as conspiracy theorists. And of course, many of us are seen as conspiracy theorists, especially as we try to piece together the series of lies that we are being handed. So that having been said, so Bernie Sanders couldn't win. They had it for Hillary, and they had these electronic voting machines already that were hackable and also could switch votes, and that has been proven. And also the exit polls have proven that in like 2004 in Ohio.
You can prove it, but they don't care.
They don't care.
Nothing is done. It's like, oh, well, you caught us, and we're going to do this anyway and get over it.
And they'll only be able to succeed in that, and media, of course, is part of this, and we know this from the WikiLeaks and, you know, all the emails that have been exposed and everything else. They'll only stop doing it if people stop accepting lies. It's up to us.
It's interesting because I usually don't talk politics because I think it's such a waste of time, and I don't like any of the. It's like I want new candidates. You guys can do better than this.
Well, Bernie was a pretty special guy.
He was, but now they're offering us Hillary and
Hillary.
And Hillary.
New World Order, Hillary and Hillary.
You know,
both sides are supporting her, the Republicans too.
Getting Donald's out there, but, you know, it's like they did the last time. They offered us Sarah Palin and, who's McCain, and then Obama. Now, out of the three, of course we're going to take Obama. But it's like, no, none of these guys are acceptable. And everything is already rigged, and they know it, and they don't care, and they're putting it in our faces. And I'm sorry, but it's like, why do you bother voting?
I hear you. Anyway, this time I did bother voting. I felt there was somebody to vote for. I was joined by millions of people. Clearly, Bernie was the favorite among people 42 and under, which I think is very exciting and a very exciting statement about our future. I was so moved to see the level of knowledge, the level of leadership, the level of commitment of all of the young people that came out for the first time. And those people aren't going to go away.
Well, don't you think it's backfiring? Because they aren't going away because they are smart. And I mean, I kind of find it offensive now because I get things on the internet from Bernie.
Yes.
Saying, okay, let's get together and talk about the issues and why you come together in the first place, instead of saying, you know, I'm going to take it forward, I'm going to run as an independent, and let's go for the presidency. I think he would win.
Yeah. But here's the thing. I think that Bernie Sanders is limited by his playing field. His playing field is the corrupt imperialist electoral two-party system, or one-and-a-half-party system, whatever we're going to call it. He unfortunately did what he could do within that environment. In fact, he did way more than anybody thought he could, that was in the know. But ultimately, they weren't going to let him win, and he had to, at the very beginning, make a commitment to basically go away and support whoever won if he did not, in order to play. Remember, he was an independent. He joined the Democratic Party to run, and that was the deal. He was the, I forget what they called it, the sheep herder. You know, they're getting all these new people in. Hopefully some of them, they figured, would vote for Hillary once they were in the Democratic Party folds. But the thing is, a lot of those people, at least half of them, from what I understand, are not going to vote for Hillary Clinton. They're not going to vote for Trump either. They're going to vote for Jill Stein. They're going to vote Green Party, most of them. If not, they'll do Peace and Freedom, or they'll write in Bernie Sanders, anything to show they're not okay with having the election stolen, and furthermore by somebody who lies, who cheats, who makes wars, and who's owned by corporations. And they're not going to be content just to go away and pull the lever.
Well, let's talk about a little bit about the other party that nobody talks about, the Green Party.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, to me, I would support any third party at this point that represented the environment, you know, the planet, caring and sharing, more equitable distribution of resources, making sure that children had food on their table, that we had decent education. These are the things that the Green Party represents, similar to what the more liberal or progressive people in the Democratic Party have tended to represent in the past. But the Green Party is unencumbered by the corporate contributions. Therefore, the people are not getting bought off in the same way.
Now, is she registered in all 50 states?
I don't think she's registered in 50 yet, but and I'm not entirely sure, but I think it may be something like 48 at this point. I did go to the protests at the Democratic National Convention in Philadelphia this year, which was quite the experience, let me tell you. And among other things, there was what was called the Green Convergence. There was a big tent area in the park there by the Wells Fargo Center, where the DNC was being held, and Jill Stein was among the speakers. So it was Cornel West, Medea Benjamin. There were a number of really, really good speakers there, and what was the question? Oh my.
Well, okay. Who are these people? Who's Medea Benjamin? Who is Cornel West?
Okay. Medea Benjamin is a activist of many, many years, very much about ending wars and militarization. She is part of Code Pink and Global Exchange. She's been on the front line, whether it's in trying to break the embargo of goods needed getting into the West Bank and Gaza, the occupied territories, the Middle East. You name it, she's there. She's really an inspiring woman and a true hero to me. Cornel West is a writer, an academician, an economist, a brilliant guy, African-American, highly respected, and has come out very strongly for Jill Stein. So is Medea. Margaret Flowers, another activist, is running, I believe, for Congress on the Green Party ticket in support. And there we go. That was your question. So, yeah, so can I tell you a little bit about this protest? So I went to the protest at the Democratic National Convention because I was just as angry as so many other people that they managed to steal an entire election, to change the votes around, to discard millions of votes, to lie that Bernie Sanders had already lost before there was even an election held in California, which meant people didn't even go out to vote. I just was so outraged at everything that happened in this election. And also the WikiLeaks things, these emails that proved that they stole the election, that they worked with CNN and MSNBC and the New York Times and everybody else to get that win for Hillary at the expense of Bernie Sanders, how they even called him an atheist and tried to undermine his Judaism because they felt that without the Jewish supporters he would lose. I mean, it went on and on. There were 20,000 emails. They were also highly insulting towards Latinos, who they called the taco. I mean, it was really, really bad. They couldn't even find somebody to chair the Democratic National Committee when Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who was chairing it, had to step down because she clearly was totally behind this manipulation, because the two next people in line to step up were also incriminated in these emails. So, I mean, from top to bottom, okay. So I decided I was going to go and join the people's protest, and I hadn't given up on the possibility that maybe with the people's help we could make, Bernie, the true winner, emerge victorious, particularly if all of the horrible things she was doing, continued to come out to roost. But as you say, do people even care? So anyway, I went to Philadelphia, and it was very exciting. Also, I'm a legal observer. I'm trained by the National Lawyers Guild, so I did do legal observing for a Black Lives Matters protest, and it was a big march. We probably marched 8 to 10 miles from over one side, clear on one side of Philadelphia, all the way over to the Wells Fargo.
What do you do as a legal observer?
You wear a special hat. You have legal information, know your legal rights information for protesters. But basically what you're doing is you're just observing. You're not participating. You don't have any political shirts on. You don't get into the action, but you're there on the side watching to make sure that everybody's safe, to make sure there's no weird thing happening or confrontation, particularly from police. That's generally where our focus is going to be. But there could be a provocateur that could look like a protester that they'll even put into the thing. We do not do anything to intervene, although we will sometimes sort of circle or stay in the area to try to prevent it from happening. But basically our role is to record, to take pictures, to write notes, to get as much information as possible. As a legal observer, I have at times, actually the person who was being arrested, gotten their legal information, their date of birth, all their stuff, so if the contact person found out if they wanted to be bailed out, those kinds of things. And then you track until they're out of jail. And if needed, you would also try to help them find them legal representation from the National Lawyers Guild or another group. So I went and I did that, and I went to these outside meetings, and I went to the protests, and I went to the Still Bernie Sanders March, and all of these things. There was also a wonderful series of workshops and convergences at the Friends Center. So the Quakers, the American Friends Service Committee, that group, they have a large conference center there, and they converged all kinds of people, like where do we go from here, continuing the revolution. And also one which was the socialist convergence, where like all the different socialist groups got up and talked about what they thought the strategy should be now. And most were going to support Jill Stein. So that was kind of exciting. She's doing quite well in the polls. She's already up to 16%, which is quite shocking for a Green Party candidate for president, with everything that they have done and will continue to do to undercut her or prevent her from even being in the debates. So anyway, so I went to this protest, and here's the funny thing. A relative of mine is a Hillary Clinton delegate. I'm not saying who, okay? And this particular person was instrumental in my ending up inside of the Democratic National Convention on one day, the day that Obama spoke. And it's a big day, actually, the second to the last day. So the day before Hillary Clinton accepted the nomination. So that was Wednesday. And she said it was perfectly okay for me to come in wearing my Bernie Sanders and stop the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership things, and all my stop fracking, all the things that Hillary is working the wrong direction on. And so I did, although I sat in this person's area, and, but I chanted when we would do protests, which they all, by the way, you wouldn't hear them on TV. They used white noise machines. They focused in other directions. They did anything. Every time you heard a chant of USA, USA, there were people saying no war, or no TPP, or whatever. That's why that switched to these very fascist chants, USA, stronger, 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 and these basically like war chants. So being on the inside was pretty interesting, to say the least. And I don't know if you know this, but they actually prevented a lot of the Bernie delegates from getting back in when they went outside. And on the last day, they weren't allowed in, and they hired from Craigslist actors to fill those seats. They were paid $50 a day to look nice, cheer loud, and support Hillary. So anyway, and that was quite an experience. Then the last day I was out on the streets again in the press when Hillary Clinton was did the acceptance speech. And but I do think that the fact that Bernie had to endorse Hillary when it was clear that they wouldn't let him win affected the number of protesters that were there. People felt very discouraged by that. And
sure, they felt betrayed to a big degree.
And a lot of those people would have gone nowhere near the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. They would never have even been there if it hadn't been for Bernie. And so by him kind of giving up in a way, it left people
hanging,
sad,
hanging. Like, now what do we do?
Mm-hmm.
Because here you've put everything and stood up against Hillary, and now all of a sudden want me to support Hillary?
Right.
What's wrong with this picture?
I don't know. There was something he said early on in his thing that he would never endorse Hillary, and if he ever did, that people shouldn't listen or something like that. They shouldn't believe him.
Well, I would think at that stage of the game, it was like the Gore-Bush thing. When Gore won the popular vote and Bush won, they gave it to Bush.
Right.
They're both skull and bones.
Right.
And I would say Bush had higher rank and Gore had to back down.
Right.
And you saw how miserable he was. And then, at the end, they gave him the Peace Prize. What a joke that is. We won't get into that one.
Yeah, well, better than Obama getting the Peace Prize. Considering all the war. I know.
Well, that's what I mean. It's just a big friggin' joke. And then you consider the person that put it together was the guy who invented dynamite. You're not surprised that these idiots getting the Peace Prize. It's reptilian logic. Mm-hmm. Whatever they're saying, the peace, but we're going to give it to somebody who's, creating war instead. And we're just going, oh, yeah. Oh, isn't that brilliant? Oh, isn't it? It's like, no, you guys, what's wrong? Awaken. So to me, I'm looking at the Bernie, and I would lay odds that he was threatened. You either, say yay Hillary, or you and your family are going to end up dead.
A lot of people are dying. A huge number. I think we're up to like 12 people that were going to testify at the DNC, about the DNC, people who were going to talk about the emails. All kinds of people like that are just being murdered. I mean, it's crazy.
And dying in such bizarre ways that they're murdered. And it's not, if somebody was tied to a tree when he died, and they're saying that he killed himself, and he was tied to his tree and shot twice with a shotgun.
Well, I think he must have killed himself.
Okay, he was like rubber man. Okay, he could do things when he was tired, but it's and people are just going, oh, okay.
Yeah, that's the thing that really troubles me. People are witnessing genocide. They are witnessing the killing of millions of children and vulnerable, innocent people around the world, knowing nothing about these countries, knowing nothing about the people in these countries, and yet they're saying it's okay because they're bad. They must be bad. And by not doing anything when our governments are killing, they are killing in our name. We share responsibility.
I agree. And that's why I highly recommend parents to not allow their children to go into the military. I mean, if there isn't a greater act of protest as you keep your sons and daughters out of the military, you refuse to allow them to be cannon fodder, which is all they are. And they're not only that, but they're guinea pigs for the
pharmaceutical companies, the injections they give them, which make them sick later on.
Let alone all the radiation they're taking in, which they come home now and they bring to their families.
The depleted uranium from all those bombs, all of it.
I mean, and you take that, and it's like, why would anybody want to go into the military? Why do they give them dog tags? That should say it right there. That is what the government thinks of these guys. They're dogs to be disposed of. And you're going to get a dog tag so I can show you exactly how much you mean to me. And you mean so much to me, people in the military, that I'm going to cut all your social programs. So you don't get the mental health. And I'm going to delay all your problems and keep delaying them like Agent Orange. So you will die before I have to pay you anything. Aren't I really cool? Come join the military. Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm pro-military, not.
So I want to say this too, and going back to Bernie Sanders, I will connect this stuff, by the way, but going back to Bernie Sanders for a second, he, to his credit, he's not telling everybody to give up. He's telling them to continue. There's the Sanders Institute. There's a whole, our revolution. There's a whole continuing focus on getting both progressive independents elected to the Congress and everything else, and also fighting TPP, on the platform, on the issues.
What's a TPP? Tell people.
Oh, man, that's a corporate coup. They call it a free trade agreement. First of all, those trade agreements have nothing to do with trade. They have everything to do with corporate control and loss of individual employment rights or anything else. So the TPP is the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and it is the latest of, you remember NAFTA and APEC? APEC was the first, there was NAFTA, all these different trade agreements, so-called trade agreements. What that means is it gives better conditions for trade for huge corporations between countries. What that means is then you lose jobs in your country. Like the TPP that was analyzed, it's going to lose over 1 million jobs.
If I'm right, it's even set up in such a way, and this is really scary because they really sat down, they were really thorough, that anything other than coming from a doctor, any kind of alternative health care is going to be illegal.
That's right.
You won't be able to grow a garden, you won't be able to grow herbs because that's going to be considered illegal.
Besides, it interferes with corporate profits.
Right, I mean,
In the TPP, what happens now with the corporations is that they can sue governments for interfering with their future profits. So if they label GMOs or if they have organic food, it will interfere with those corporations' profits. And so they can sue the governments. And remember, corporations have more money than governments. So basically, pure corporate world order.
Well, I can even get, if this passes, with my healing tools, which are made out of rocks. I wouldn't be able to say that it has any kind of healing abilities. You can't even do massage because they classified your fingers as massage tools. And the only way you will be able to get a massage, a legal one, is doctor ordered and sanctioned.
That's disgusting.
Oh, absolutely. Especially being here in Hawaii where everybody is encouraged to have gardens, and alternative medicine is the thing in Hawaii. That's what happens here.
Yeah. Well, I do see more people working independently of their governments, which is exciting, especially on the local level where people are coming together. They're growing their own crops. They're growing them organically. They're sharing. They're doing barter with other people or whatever it is, locally, sustainably. And, we may have to go a little more underground.
Well, that's kind of hard when you're growing a garden.
Yes, it is.
You can't hide a garden. You can hide marijuana plants sometimes, but not a big garden that's going to feed
and
people.
Not always.
True. What was the highlight of the DNC for you?
Well, it was kind of, I have to just share something personal, really, for me, was that here I was with my relative, my close relative, who was a Hillary delegate, and that she just so openly allowed me to come in and have the experience and be who I was inside of there, and that we actually sat together. We actually ended up in one of the ABC things.
But you weren't harassed for wearing Bernie?
They tried. The thing was, we didn't really have the what do you call them? The laminates, or was the word? The credentials. We didn't have our credentials. Somebody had lent us theirs once they were seated to get us in, whatever. not my relative. Anyway, and so we kind of just tried to be discreet, except when other people were doing things, and put up our signs. This was me and the fellow I was dating at the time. Didn't work out. But anyway, he was a Bernie guy too, so that worked out well though. And so we tried to, they came over like a couple of times, and we thought that they were going to move us out, but they got distracted. But they did move a lot of people out, including delegates who had credentials. They moved them out. They forced people to give up their Bernie Sanders signs, and unite and replace them. I think it was called United Together or something like that.
Boy, talk about censorship.
Oh, totally. And then so what people did in the Bernie thing, they had magic markers, and they crossed out, United for Bernie, or they did all these different versions of. And then some people were kicked out who had done that as well. Oh no, it's scripted. This is not democratic. Anybody who thinks this is democratic after following what's been happening along this line. But people don't even notice or don't seem to even care. Or if they're getting their news from the mainstream media, which we already know is totally biased.
How can it be democratic when you have an electoral college that negates everybody's vote, and they can vote on whim and change their mind to whatever they want?
Yeah, you got delegates and super delegates.
And when we go take over a country, and we help them set up the voting, we don't say, oh, God, don't forget the Electoral College. You really need that one. That'll keep your leaders in power. It's awesome. It works well for us.
No, we also moved Diebold and Sequoia, the two largest of the electronic voting machine companies and the most corrupted. We have them do their elections. Like in Mexico, this election, all these elections that the popular leaders don't seem to be winning, are using these same poor private electronic voting machine companies.
I saw one day, and this, God, was years ago. I was still in California, so it's been, 15 years ago. And it was the news, and they had the board, and they had red and blue states. And then I was talking about how he thought it was very interesting how everyone voted Democratic, usually, for the election. But they would change their votes to Republican for the governor or some position of, and I'm listening and I'm thinking, how idiotic can you be? Aren't they just telling you right there how they're setting up the voting? Mm-hmm. I mean, people don't all of a sudden switch to the top honcho, the party. I mean, and they put it right in your face how we're being screwed.
Yeah, they do. They do. And I think most people are, I hate to say this, but between alcohol and prescription drugs and football games and just not being able to make enough money to support your kids and your family, so you have to do 3-4 jobs or whatever, people are sufficiently distracted to not be paying attention or seemingly not to care anymore, like they've been numbed down to violence and killing.
But they're dumbed down. I mean, my best story about them being dumbed down is I had 2 flat tires, same day, same side of the car, went to have them put on. And you normally, and I've not gone to, repair school, you would take the tires when you get new tires and you put them on either in the back or the front. The guy put them on the same side as I had the flats, okay? Yeah. One front, one in the back. And when I went and approached him and I go, why did you do that? And he said, because they didn't tell me to do anything different. And I'm thinking, how stupid can you be? Do you not think at all for yourself and understand that this is wrong? And you would have sent me out like that.
I know, and I'm experiencing the same thing. And what's so sad about it too is that people are so buying this hook, line, and sinker that people like us are feeling a lot like, like a stranger in a strange land, like, an alien. Like, I don't feel I belong here anymore. When even family members of mine, all my family members who've always had good critical thinking skills and have been so intelligent, maybe they're just too much a part of the system to be able to see their way outside of it, And then they minimize others that don't go along with the program?
Well, because if they didn't, that means they have to rethink what they are doing and look at themselves totally different. So it's much easier to make the other person the bad guy.
Yes, it is.
And, again, that's manipulating, and projecting what you do on somebody else. And it's actually you're the one who's doing it.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. I mean, right now I'm just beside myself. So this relative of mine, because she was a delegate, the other family members came around, and we all ended up going to New York, where we're from, after, shared time with family, which was really lovely. But, I was the only person out there. I mean, still, there were people who had voted for Bernie in the primary, but then they were like, okay, fine, he's not in there anymore. And they didn't even question how that happened. And they just moved on.
I was talking to a woman who said, oh, yeah, I'm for Hillary. I don't believe anything that they're saying bad about her because in the beginning she was for families and for children. And
you know what? She was at that time.
And she was at that time, but she ain't down that road anymore, and they won't see her as for what she is, nor when you bring up all the people that are dying around her in Bill.
Yeah. Or Haiti, she masterminded the coup in Haiti, in a lot of countries, but in Haiti, but was behind the killing of the civil rights leader, Bertha Cáceres. And, all in Haiti, they're making a big state demonstrations about not having Hillary. I mean, it's like many countries like this who are in huge protests around it. But, you're right. When she was the president of the Children's Defense Fund, she did do some good things for children and families. And as First Lady, she did try to do single-payer health care. So in other words, basically health care for all, which is a good thing. But what happened was, at that time, it seems to be where the insurance companies and everybody else got their little hook into her, because certainly when she's tried to do anything since then, it's all been about insurance companies, and basically it's giving them more money and more income from all of these people, and then they have to pay for it. So, I mean, the Obamacare is, I suppose, better than nothing for a lot of people, but it's certainly not health care.
And God, it's not health. It's like, how can you call it health care when you're forcing me to get an insurance company?
Insurance, exactly.
And I'm not even going to use it. There is no insurance company for alternative medicine.
Right. Exactly. But and I say this to people who say, I believe that Hillary will do good things. I believe her. I'm like, well, why should you believe? Just take a look at her voting record as senator of New York State. And you'll see that what has she done? Spy wars, surveillance, drones, Monsanto, oil and gas, and everything else. She has voted in no way in favor of the people or the environment. So for people to think, and been a big supporter of Trans-Pacific Partnership, which we know what the devil that is. So now she's saying she's against it because Bernie forced her to, but Obama's pushing it through, so she won't have to.
They flip-flop anyway. And, you look at Bonham, they say whatever they have to get in, and then they do what they want.
Yeah.
And there's no repercussions. And you look at the guy from Michigan, Snyder, and what he's doing to that state and to the people from Flint, and the poisoning, and how he's not even held accountable when it's on him, and he allowed it.
Yeah. I thought he was going to be impeached or something. Nothing happened to that guy?
They started petitions. I don't know where the petitions ended up. I know 4 people got criminally charged, but it's not going up high enough. It's like, okay, who are the 4 people we can sacrifice? So it looks like we're addressing the problem without addressing it at all. When he goes down and, he gets out of office, then I'll believe.
Yeah. Well, at the DNC, they talked about the Flint thing. In fact, they had, they gave an award to, I don't know, might have been the mayor in Flint, somebody who was really trying to address the issue. And they spoke. And basically, they showed a film in which Hillary Clinton had gone out to meet with the people and to address the concerns and promise them. But look, nothing's changed. No. So why is she using that as part of her?
Because it's good PR. And how many people around Flint have died?
Yeah.
mysteriously, that we're taking Flint to court over what they did with the lead and the water, you know? And
it's a hard time right now. It's a very hard time. It's so important that we're grounded, and we're grounded in a spiritual way, grounded in a way that's about love, that's about sharing and caring, because there's so much right now to feel so very sad about, so depressing, and it's happening so quickly, but so is the awareness of many, many people growing at the same time, and you can see the love in their eyes, and that's what, if anything, is going to save this planet and its people. It's going to be
the only thing, and that's why I work so hard to quantum leap the world into enlightenment, because once that happens, people are reconnected to the Creator and they know better, and all this shit stops.
Yeah.
And whatever activism you're in, it's going to be easier because people will know better and they will come and help you.
Well, it's also, if you're not driven by hatred, you're more likely to reach people and find other people to work with you. That's just the truth of it. There's so many activists out there that are just all about, hostility and anger, and surely there's reason to be angry, but if you can't transform that into love and understand that you're being guided by the love of the many, then you're not going to really reach too many.
No, not at all. So, I believe we can do it. And God, I saw on Twitter a couple of days ago, somebody says, oh yeah, we can do it if we focus on 2040. And it's like, dude,
we don't have that long.
We don't have that long. Let's try for this year, okay? Let's do something different. You got a great concept, but let's just kind of, speed it up.
Move it up a
tad.
Yeah.
I'm so tired of hearing hasta mañana. It's always tomorrow. And no, we can do it this year if people will focus. Many people talk about enlightenment, but very few people are willing to put any kind of energy into it. And it's so frustrating.
Yeah, and all talk, no action. I know it. And also the other thing is that we need to slow it down a little bit, because I think that all of us are speeding around trying to get everything done, and it becomes a sort of an ADD kind of a thing, and that's not a conscious state. It's not a mindful state, and we have to be able to slow it down enough, whether it's through meditation or yoga or being in nature or just looking into our loved one's eyes, so that we can remember and reconnect.
God, the balance is so important, like we're doing now. We're going to do right after. We're on vacation time. But no, you have to have the balance, or you get so off-center. And the challenge is to be it and not to be in it, but not become it.
Yes. And there are a lot of people, too, that just leave it because they can't handle being in it and not becoming it. So they go and they set up something separate, or they go out to the land in some isolated place. And it's all very beautiful, but it's not going to help anyone but you.
Unless you're doing a lot of light work. And you need the peace and the quiet. But where do you see this going?
Oh, Cathy. It doesn't look so good to me right now, but I'm hopeful. And the reason I'm hopeful is because I feel, at least I know I'm part of the change, for lack of a better word, that I'm part of the solution, that I'm just one of so many people who are saying enough, 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 it's enough already. And we're putting our foot down, we're not participating, we're knocking on doors, we're protesting, we're doing whatever we need to do to try to wake more people up and get them active and motivated to be a part of the difference that's needed right now, because we certainly cannot wait for our elected officials to do it for us. They've already been booked.
Oh my God, they won't even talk about Fukushima and the radiation that's poisoning us in the air. Mm-hmm. They're so, I even had one, and I will name him, Senator Schultz from Hawaii. When I asked him what he suggests about the radiation, he actually put it in writing and told me I really don't have to worry about it, because the scientists told him that the air and the water would diffuse the radiation, and, it would be anything. And I'm thinking, what planet are you living on, dude? How dare you lie to me like that? Because not only are you endangering my life and telling me not to worry, not to do anything to protect myself, but you're also endangering your family.
I know. Well, BPA in the water now, I believe there was new measurements done right here in the water, And it's filled with BPA, which is a carcinogen and a hormone disruptor, which is found in plastics and tin, like cans, food, a lot of our food, still packaged with it. Can't seem to get it eliminated.
Well, that's where organic comes in, and learning how to grow your own garden.
But the thing is, it could be organic. It could be organic. Believe me, I'm all for organics. But it could be organic and still be in a BPA-laden container. That's what I'm talking about.
Oh.
I see lots of organic foods in plastic that doesn't say BPA-free, or in cans, same thing.
Yeah, there is so much to look out for. You know, you almost need a book to travel with you, you know.
And you don't want to live fear-driven. You want to be careful and cautious, but you don't want to be ridiculous and alienate yourself from everybody around you either. So it's a bit of a balancing act. You know, it'd be wonderful to hear from other people on the show or whatever, you know, people listening, to hear how they achieve that balance and what it looks like for them. Because I think by now, especially if you're, you know, moving up in the years, you've got plenty to balance already.
No comment. Hopefully as you get older, you get wiser, and it's a little bit easier because you've realized what works for you and what doesn't. And then you go in that direction, which really gets people upset too, because, you know, I mean, I'm 63, and people come into my life like I'm 20, and I'm just starting. And, and I'm
the arrogance.
Yeah, the arrogance, and I don't know anything. And it's like, dude, I've been doing this for like 30 years. You know, when you're on your path, just support people. Don't knock them down.
Yeah, I think people have a need to knock each other down quite a bit. Maybe to cover up their own deficiencies or what they're not doing or whatever else it is. But I agree with you. It's like, gosh, if the people who could be on the same side of this, on the sharing and caring side of this, could try to, even if they don't understand it, not to tear people down. You know, we need each other now more than ever before.
And again, you don't even realize what could be making you angry. Mm-hmm. It can be actually maybe something that somebody said, or you're being sent frequencies that's irritating you, or you're around smart meters.
Oh, yes.
Which is your other, you know.
Yeah, I'm very sensitive to wireless electricity or wireless radiation. It is a form of radiation, and microwave pulse radiation. And smart meters are also surveillance devices. They're really designed to capture, energy surveillance specifically. Now it's water, gas, and electric, and ultimately will be to monitor and control our use. And also, they're using already the information that they get, because we have these smart chips in our refrigerators and our washing machines and our everything else. So that's all being communicated wirelessly now with your meter, and then all the way over to the electric and gas and water companies. And they're then marketing your information about your use patterns to third parties, meaning mega corporations, so that they can sell you things.
What a racket.
Yeah, and these authorities were supposed to be public or quasi-public authorities. Once again, how is it that our water, gas, and electric got privatized? How is it that we have CEOs who are supposed to be bringing public services who are making, $350 million a year?
How did it get to be illegal in some states to collect water?
Yes.
I want to know, don't those people ever go after the people that make that law and say, I don't think so. You guys are out of your effing mind. This is not a law we're going to go along with, and take it off the books.
Yeah, or independent solar now is being outlawed in a lot of places as well. Same kind of thing. It's fine as long as you tie it into their profit grid, and as long as they can continue to monitor you. But this is very difficult. I mean, not only for people, for a number of people, but for people like me who are sensitive to this stuff, people don't know where to go. We're learning from each other. We've found little crazy places, and we become paranoid. Don't tell anyone there's no cell phone signal over there, because of course they'll put in another cell phone tower, because they have an aim to create no cell phone free zones in the United States, because supposedly for emergency purposes.
You'll love my house. I'm hardwired into the computer. You cannot get Wi-Fi.
Awesome.
And I had to go to Skype to use as Skype phone because my internet sucks. So I don't even bother with it, which is really nice because I find myself sleeping better without all that electromagnetic energy bothering me. I don't wake up, at night with the sweats.
Right, sweats, that's one of the main symptoms, or the palpitations.
I wake
up
up with sweats. I mean, it's so bad that it's like, for you guys who've never been through a hot flash, well, it's, you wake up and you go from cold to sweating.
It's also a hormone disruptor.
Yeah, and I'm not menopause anymore. So, all of that stuff. And I really believe living near the ocean, there'd be times I would see this, like a ship that's just hanging out there. It makes you wonder, what the hell are they doing out there?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know I'm on an island and you should see boats, but when one hangs out, like when you live there, where you live, and, outside the ocean, and you just wonder, what are they directing? Are they, spying? Are they pushing any kind of secret frequencies at you? You don't know what the hell they're doing.
No, they're using all kinds of frequencies as tools of war in protest situations. I was part of Occupy LA, the Occupy Wall Street greed thing, and believe me, when we had protests, the police came out there with technology that actually did just that and made us very, very ill. That's when a lot of us developed our wireless sensitivities.
Whoa, I get chills.
You bet it is.
Oh my God, I never put that together.
Yeah, Barry Trower is a scientist from Great Britain, and he can tell you all about that stuff. He specializes in it.
Yeah, I would love to get him on. I don't know how to do it. I'd love to get him on my program.
Okay, I think I can help. Yeah, I have a contact, so we will try to do what we can on that.
Yes.
Stay tuned.
She's cool. She knows people. I like that.
Well, we become the experts in electromagnetic sensitivity, so we all know each other, and some of us have contacts with some and some with another.
And on that high note, everybody, you have an awesome week. Do many random acts of kindness, and just be kind, You never know when you're under psychic attack or frequencies, and don't buy into it. Focus on the light. Don't go ghetto.
Make love.